like,
All right, starting.
you know how to do editing, right? Okay, so this is from the intro to that book.
Okay, what are we talking about?
Technique. I was trying to explain technique to you.
Technique of what?
Technique, the idea of technique that Ellul talks about, and this is what he's built his sociological stuff on.
Okay.
His professional secular reputation. He says technique represents the widespread use of a scientific and discipline-based approach to knowing, accompanied by a similar technical approach to doing. This technical approach explains the successes and failures of our civilization. We succeed brilliantly at improving the performance of everything, and fail spectacularly at ensuring that all these improvements fit into and are compatible with human life, society, and the biosphere. Once again, we have ended up serving that which we created to serve us.
Okay.
So, yeah. It's a critique of secularism at some level, or modern secularism. And that's part of, he's written books on that, how secularism just reproduces myth. And cycles back on itself, and the grand overthrow of myth is nothing but a recycling of old ideas in a more dangerous form. Because now we don't have myth, we're not aware that we have myth. We don't live in myth and say, wow, these are my myths, these are what's valuable to me. We live in myth and say we have no myths, because we have truth. We have direct access to reality and direct access to truth, because we have direct access to reality, and yeah.
Yeah, and that goes back to the idea that somebody who denies that they exist within a story no longer has the power to change it.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a lot of what his secular career was about. Was critiquing that, and especially in the modern form, where we're so good at perfecting technology, and yet we have no idea how to live with technology. We have no idea, and which ties into Foucault's power knowledge and discussions of subjection and all those things. Modern political state where it watches you and it owns you, and yet we don't even. It's an internal control. It's something that's so built into the system that we're blind to it to a large degree. But yeah, now, I thought it was interesting too. I mean, I noted with that discussion it spins right back on the first commandment, which he touches on as well in the intro. The idea of idolatry, and that's a myth. At some level, myth is tied up in idolatry. It's not the same, but very connected. The sense of clinging to stories. This is my story, and then this is my representation of that story. And you solidify it, and you set it in stone or concrete or whatever, and you worship. You literally serve the story rather than the story serving you. Which then ties into Lord of the Sabbath.
Yeah, I was just thinking that Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Which would then go back into the same sort of split that this guy was talking about, the Karaites, the split between the oral law and the Torah, I guess, and the written law, so to speak.
How so?
Well, because the whole idea of the oral law was, as he described it, was that it was the duty of the rabbis to interpret the law, and they were the lords of it, essentially. Like, in other words, they were the ones whose job was to make the myth solid and unbreakable.
They were the scientists.
Yeah, their job was to make their myth something that was so all-encompassing that you could serve it, rather than it being a service to you. Like, their goal was to
and yet it wasn't a self-reflexive act. It wasn't as if they saw what they were doing in those terms.
No.
They weren't myth makers. They were truth discoverers. They were, in some ways, very paralleling to science.
I guess the way I understood it was
they had direct access to reality,
and reality was the stories that they've been given. And because they took the approach that they did in getting full benefit from these myths...
You mean exploiting the people by the myths?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they wanted to be able to live these myths with 100% accuracy. I think we've read about and this is we talk about this paradigm shift following the going into Babylonian captivity, where there was the big shift from being a lot of sort of loosey-goosey approaches to reading the Bible or following the prophets and stuff, and all of a sudden they said, we need to get our act together, because now look what happens if we don't follow these myths to the letter. So we are now going to figure out exactly what that means.
Yeah, and that's so broken, because then myth becomes, and that goes right into the literal, verbal inerrancy
Mm-hmm.
and inspiration, in the sense that what you actually can literally live in a myth 100%.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make sense. You can't inhabit a story like that. Because the story is a vehicle for meaning, it's not the meaning itself. And it's always muddy and it's always a little bit fuzzy around the edges.
Yeah. I mean, I think they obviously have to acknowledge the fuzziness around the edges. But at the same time,
Well,
the
no, they
goal was to not.
The goal was to remove all the fuzziness. It was to get rid of all the gray and paint a nice solid black border.
Yeah, and the way this Karaite rabbi talks about it, he says, you have the rule about putting your shoes on. You put on first your left shoe, then your right shoe, then you tie the laces on your right shoe, and you tie the laces on your left shoe. And if there's no laces on your shoes, well, then you still have to put on the left and the right, right? Or
Really? Or that's just
now I might have
example.
Had
this is a literal rule.
Yeah. This is a literal rule.
Oh wow.
Though I might have gotten the order backwards, in which case, yeah. And so he was talking about again. He was presenting. Okay, I was telling you about the rabbi who talked about how Jesus was essentially talking about the differences between the oral law and the Torah because.
Yeah. Well, he enjoyed pointing out the gray spaces. He was like, you think that's a solid boundary? Let me poke it. And then it shows up as not being a boundary.
So again, and so he said that a lady came up to him and said, well, the approach to Scripture, the approach to interpretation that you've just described, in other words, trying to add on traditions, add on interpretations, trying to solidify things in this way, are you sure you weren't describing my denomination? And he said, well, if the shoe fits, wear it. Just make sure you put it on the right foot first.
I was going to say. Oh, man. And he didn't say what denomination it was, though.
No, but I think it applies to pretty much every denomination.
To some degree. Well, and that's the catch in any denomination, because, I mean, at some level, and that's the double-edgedness of religion,
mm-hmm.
is on the one hand, religion is so valuable because it's a vehicle for the transmission of stories.
Yeah.
Of myth. Which isn't in of itself bad. The problem is when it gets to the place where it tries to turn myth into reality.
Well, I mean, as Adventists...
And it, at some level, assumes that it can actually absolutely represent reality in story.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with this within my own view because in some ways, when I look at Adventism, my gut reaction is, wow, we have got such amazing stories. Like our understanding of the great controversy of how everything works is an incredible myth, and then the temptation is to then try to live within it because of how amazing it is. And again, and falling into the same trap. Yeah, to overuse it.
It's that sense where you can go from the great controversy, which carries a very specific meaning about what's happening in the universe, what's at stake in our existence, what's at stake between good and evil, and all that kind of thing, and turn it into something that can be applied every day and every moment.
Mm-hmm.
The great controversy is playing out right now on my breakfast table. It matters what I eat for breakfast. Like, or you get to, well, it matters who I talk to. Because that person might be on the other side, and if I talk to them, I could be led astray.
Or they could be a devil's rabbit and waste my valuable time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because every act then becomes a great controversy, and it's not. It's not to say it's not significant, but the great controversy isn't talking about our daily actions. It's talking about a big picture that gives context to our daily actions.
So could you apply the exact same, the Lord of the Sabbath analogy to the overarching myth of, the way Adventists view the history of salvation? Could we say that, salvation,
I think so.
We were not made for salvation, salvation was made for us. Yeah,
well, and I think Sabbath is so interesting for that, because that, at some level, that is the Adventist idol. And you go traditional, I don't know what word to call it. It's not exegesis, it's not theology. Sort of conventional, popular Adventist understanding. Mm-hmm. That's probably the best way to do it. Says, well, Sabbath is going to be the defining thing in the end. In the sense that God is literally going to judge us on, we're going to be sealed because we go to church on Saturday. Or because we keep Saturday, we keep Saturday from sunset to sunset, or like some specific... some really specific thing.
Unless we're in the Northwest Territories, in which case, no.
Yeah, or on that island that switched and had to figure out what the heck they were doing. Switch sides of the international date line. But outside of that, maybe they're just screwed either way, because God just can't handle that kind of uncertainty. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of what it is, and yet what the Sabbath is, and I think there's something to that, the idea that Sabbath is going to be the deciding factor, but not in the sense of at some level material's not the word, a nominal sort of assent, I guess, in the sense that, well, I go to church on Saturday and that's all that matters, as opposed to understanding what the Sabbath is about and connecting it to that whole Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath, and connecting into an entire larger context.
Mm-hmm.
Because I guess that's the catch too, is when you draw the borders, you literally decontextualize, you cut out a shape, which then... Yeah, because that's literally what the borders are. The borders are cutting off all the gray areas, cutting off all the connections, and all the context, and all, at some level, all responsibility, and all vulnerability, and all openness to change. I mean, all those things are all
cut the crap, together. Get to the point.
Yeah. It's so true.
Okay, and I guess I see that a lot as well with the way we discuss the Antichrist. In that many, not just Adventists, but people from all religions like to think of the Antichrist as an individual who will kind of a precursor of the end of times, or else we have different understandings of them.
Something which can be concretely pinned down.
Yeah, and our goal of seeing the Antichrist as an individual takes away the context of the meaning. I mean, if the Antichrist was just an individual, why would the Bible even care that some big baddie is going to rise up at the end of time? Would they care one way or the other?
Well, if it was, why wouldn't he just say it? He named Cyrus. Why wouldn't he just say, it's going to be Bill Gates, or
No, Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, yes, okay, I could go with that. But I've never heard anybody call him the Antichrist, except maybe me. But
yeah, I mean, so if it wasn't for the context surrounding the individual and the message that he represented, there wouldn't be any reason to put it in the Bible. But because we like to cut off the context to understand, to have that concrete meaning, so to speak, or that we want to know the point or the individual.
Cut to the chase.
Yeah, we cut to the chase and we miss the point.
Yeah, don't give me a whole story. Just tell me who it was. Which, yeah.
Yes.
So true. And that sort of connects, I think, I'm still working my way through Patriarchs and Prophets.
Uh-huh.
Reading I'm like, I've read this before in the Bible, and it never clicked for some reason. It's not a very big part of the story, but when the Israelites get to Canaan the first time, okay, they stop at Sinai for a while, then they stop again somewhere and get in all kinds of trouble over meat, and then they make it to Canaan. They send the spies, and the spies come back, and 10 of them say, no, don't do it, and they all panic. And God says, okay, we're not going to do it. At that point, that actually wasn't the end of the story. They said, no. After God said, okay, you can't go in because you're a bunch of whiners, they said, oh, no, we're going to do it. We want to go in now, we're ready. And so they actually got a bunch of guys together and went in to take Canaan and got their butts kicked and seriously beat down. And God's like, and God's like talking to Moses. He's like, Moses, tell them not to go. They're being stupid. They're going to get into trouble. And they're like, no, God called us to this. God wants us to go into Canaan, so we're going to go take Canaan now. And totally missing the point that it was a relational thing. It was about them following God and letting God work rather than having Canaan, being in Canaan. Canaan wasn't
the goal.
Was tangential.
And Canaan obviously wasn't the reason. Yeah, Canaan obviously wasn't the reason why they were for the 40 years in the wilderness. I think, and that's how we understand it today, is that the 40 years in the wilderness were God's way of reconnecting with them and teaching them about him, because they'd forgotten almost everything through their generations of slavery, 400 years of slavery.
Yeah, it was teaching them to trust, because
then it was a crash course.
That was all he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
All he wanted was the trust. The point, but they're like, but it's all about Canaan. And God's like, no, it's all about the connection. And I think that's the same for Sabbath, and that's the same for all those things where you can, God's trying to do something big and relational, and we cut it down to these neat little box, and we're like, okay, just give me the box, and then I'll run away with the box, and we'll be happy because I have a box. And God's like, but you could have a relationship.
Okay, well, how have we got to the point where we want to cut things down and put them into boxes, even with our view of, approaching biblical understanding from that way?
I think it goes back to Eden. I think it's a fundamentally human thing. We've taken it to an extraordinarily sophisticated level in modern society.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at some level, as a result of the ways Christianity has gone wrong. I mean, we're direct descendants of that. But Yeah, it goes back to Eden that, they sin, and God shows up and is like, where are you? And they just hide, and they wait. And he's like, Adam, Eve, and they wait. And he wanders around, finds them, they're like, well, we were scared. And that's so it is, vulnerability, especially in the face of our human failings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is such a difficult thing.
So the vulnerability leads us to want to find safety in finding a concrete answer.
Yeah, well, it's easier to deal with boxes and objects and technology than it is to deal with relationality, to deal with people.
Mm.
I mean, that's the basis of pretty much any addiction, is rather than deal with the muddiness of relationships, you deal with the absolute dependency of a dependency of, whatever your drug of choice is.
This sounds like something that I've wished at a few times in the past, was that, if only I was born, 15 years earlier, when I graduated from high school, or not even 15, or have I made that wish? Okay, basically the idea was that if I was born in a previous generation, all of these complicated life choices that I've had to make, like what to study in school, they would have all been made for me. I would have finished high school or finished grade 10 and gone to work for my dad and worked for a while, and then I'd have bought a piece of equipment and been an owner-operator, and by that point I'd have a few kids and
work to worry about the difficulties
work for
of
40
life.
years, and all I would have had to have worked was staying alive. All of these tough decisions would have been made for me. I'm like, because
as evidenced by the Bible, nobody had to make tough decisions.
Yeah, but I mean, it's it was sort of this idea.
Age myth.
Yeah, well, I'll say, I think there's something to the myth in that the present has a lot less certainties in terms of economics than the previous generations did. I mean,
well, because we're dependent on economics.
Yeah.
I mean, you could grow your own food, and pretty much economics was what happened when you sold your your product to the guy down the road. It was an entirely different thing. Now economics is so tied up in global forces, and you can't just do all that.
And I still find myself wanting that world where I have to make fewer choices by making that conscious decision to grow more of my own food, to live, I guess, closer to the basics. And I don't think that quite relates to the idea of wanting to put my life in a box.
I think it does. And not in the way, not in a bad way.
Yeah.
I think
I choose simplicity.
Yeah.
But I don't choose decontextualization. I mean,
well, and that's the catch. I think at some level, choosing simplicity frees you to pursue relationships in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at some level, you look again. You go the Israelites, and there's so much precedent for that. God gives them outlines because He's like, this is how you're going to relate to people, because you guys are really stupid and suck at this right now. Let me give you a whole bunch of sort of framework to work in to minimize the random decision making and let you focus on what really matters. Mm-hmm. The problem was they thought that was what really mattered. That the point was to be consistent and exacting, rather than, I mean, and your thing, you talk a lot about that, living the nomadic lifestyle and living off the land and stuff. And I guess that's always my critique of that, is I see people who go that way, and it becomes something that separates them.
Yeah.
It's something that sets them apart, that makes them a peculiar people. Well, they're freaking weird,
You talk as if peculiar people is bad.
Well, it shouldn't be. But it's a double edge. And it's that idea where you can do that and it can set you apart, so you can't actually connect with people.
So it makes you not of the world and also not in the world.
Yeah.
When you want to be in it, just not of it.
Yeah. Or you can do that, or there are other people that get into that, and they simplify their lives so they have more time to focus on people. And so they can put more of their energy into connecting. And the catch is that's extremely rare, because that's extremely hard to remember that. I think you can get lost in simplicity as easily as you can get lost in the rush of modern urban life.
See, I always wondered, to me, the scariest part about monasticism was the idea that it was an escape. It was putting your entire life in a box. And I mean, the reason they did that again was theoretically because it allowed them to connect with God at a deeper level and get more complex with their spiritual relationships, even as they put everything else in a box. But I always felt that in practice it led to a lot of putting everything in boxes, like...
I think,
Not always.
That's an interesting one, because I never thought about it in that sense.
Me,
I guess
what I'm trying to do is take myself to some sort of monastic-like simplicity, but, just without the celibacy.
I guess, I mean,
Although that's working for me now, too.
part of how I run that through is I tend to, as much as I'm a very, I tend to be fairly disruptive of routines and standards and norms and boundaries. I very much depend on them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my breakfast is oatmeal almost every day of the week, and it's just, I don't do it, I like oatmeal, fine. But a lot of it is I do it because it's just, it's less decisions. I get up and I do that, and it takes me a minimal amount of time. I have it streamlined because I've done it so many times, and I go on to other things. And I mean, beyond that, then I spent grade 10 at Deer Lake with uniforms. And I fought over that. There was other stuff tied up in the fight, but it was the biggest fight I ever had with my parents. Ever. Like, it was insane. And in the end, I actually got to really appreciate it. Because I got up in the morning and I didn't have to think about what to wear. Who am I going to be today or whatever. There's no sense of, this is my image. It's gray shirt, gray pants, white polo shirt, go to school. And then, and so you disregard all these things that normally distract you, and then you can actually just connect with people. And it was amazing.
Two things I would add to that. You should listen to Radiolab does a podcast on choice, interviewing people about choice. And essentially they talk to people who always buy the exact same food simply because it's one less choice they have to make in life. And it's still a very, varied diet and stuff. But they talk about the difficulty involved in choice and the massive increase of choice within food. And that supermarkets, as they provide more food, are actually very careful not to actually provide too much more choice, because then people wouldn't buy anything. They just get, scared of the choice.
That's interesting.
So, they won't provide 5 different types of tomatoes that look very similar. They'll have one tomato on the vine, one beefsteak, one Roma. They'll never have 2 types of Roma.
See, that always drives me crazy because I like variety in my food.
Yeah, but the problem is that they can't have it. The too much choice is very difficult for people to deal with. Now, that was the first thing. The second thing was that, in the process of having conversations with every bus driver that I ever ride with, during the strike, I had 2 different drivers tell me that the hardest thing about the work slowdown or whatever was the fact that they couldn't wear uniforms.
Yeah, I actually heard that too. Yeah, not being able to wear uniforms was a pain. Because, suddenly you're worried about what am I going to wear, because, there's that whole... And some of that, that's the catch, is some of it is tied up in... We have so many societal expectations, where it's, I got this... I hear people talk, when you go for an interview, this is what you're supposed to wear. And, when we were interviewing before I left my job, and... That was some of the talk. Well, that person dressed like a professional. I'm like, what's a professional? You work at Starbucks, you wear black and black, and an apron. And nobody dresses like that for an interview, because it's boring, And it's not really that exciting, and it doesn't actually necessarily even look that professional. It doesn't look bad. It could pass, but it doesn't really get across who you are. And yet that's your uniforms. So, I guess the point is there's a disjunct between what you wear and what you end up actually wearing as a professional. And yet, we have these cultural expectations that, this is how you dress for an interview, and this is how you do this, and this is how you do that, and everybody sort of does it because everybody expects everybody to do it, because everybody thinks that everybody expects them to do it. And there's no grounding to it, it's just a circular... It's a myth, really, but nobody knows where it came from, nobody questions it.
Well, okay, it's easiest...
It avoids decision-making.
Questioning some myths can lead to problems that aren't worth the questioning.
They're always worth the questioning.
Well, I guess we get back to it. That's what this. That's what the presentation said, was essentially that the message of Jesus in Matthew is that all of these myths have to be questioned, and if you choose not to question them, you're doing the exact opposite of what he said. Now I'll have to go back and re-listen to it and figure out his exact place where he argued that from.
Makes sense, but though. It's consistent.
Yeah. Now, okay, the idea of not boxing yourself, but then choosing to live out of boxes so you can then come back into the box with context, so to speak.
Not
You can
into
live.
the
You can live in
box.
the. You can live in the space that could be contained within the box, but while maintaining the context of the world around it, so to speak. I not.
I think
you
I
know,
get what you're saying, but it's not very
yeah. Okay.
clear.
Because I guess what I'm saying is that for a lot of what we're saying is that
That idea of
the idea is
of simplifying some decision making in order to focus on other decision making.
yeah, but we're simplifying not for the purpose of taking away choice, and not for the purpose of avoiding the accidental desecration of our myths.
Yeah.
We're simplifying simply because it leads to a better life, which we know because of our experience and our context. So we are using this context to take us to our destination rather than trying to arrive at the destination without the journey and simply
Yeah.
boxing ourselves in. Now, this sounds a lot like what Samir Simonovich said, like when he was talking about getting back to when they asked him if he considered himself a liberal or conservative, and he said, "I consider myself a conservative." As I get older, I get more and more conservative because as he goes and he discusses with all the different faiths that he, in his the way he's chosen to live and pursue his ideas, and to
He's changed
choose his
that
walk.
now. He took a new job, but anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, doing
really.
interfaith stuff.
The interfaith stuff, like the way in which he's chosen to interact with all these other faiths,
Yeah.
that gradually he's like, and he said, if you transplant a tree every year to a new spot in your backyard, you may eventually find the best soil, but you have to let it grow at some point.
Yeah.
Which to me was sort of a way of again saying that do a lot of journeys so you can have a proper understanding of where you want to go, I guess. Or
Well, that's the heroic cycle.
yeah.
Yeah, you leave home, you go on a great journey, and in the end you come home again.
Huh.
And, the cliche is you come home and realize that what you were looking for is really what you already had. And
Oh, modern war movies break that so badly.
Modern War is so broken, though, but how so?
In that, okay, the Hurt Locker.
I haven't watched that.
Oh, I'm thinking of it like all these
Just
Rambo.
talk Jarheads.
Not Rambo. Rocky.
haven't seen
No.
Rocky.
Sorry,
No,
Rambo.
Rambo.
It was Rambo. Okay,
Yeah, he
there are
goes
so many
home.
movies where the hero leaves home, goes on this heroic journey, and comes home and realizes that the only place he belongs anymore is on the heroic journey, and he will never be happy at home, and he has to go back. Like
Well,
the modern war story is that when you get back from the heroic journey, you're so damaged that you are no longer good for home.
no.
No?
I don't know if that's it. I would say, I mean, I guess that's one
Or
way of
else
putting it.
it takes so much. The journey almost begins when the heroic journey. Okay, let me rephrase this. Maybe I've understood it wrong. Maybe these movies are actually arguing that the real heroic journey begins when you get back home and have to make the journey to once again feel at home.
That could be. Well, that's the problem of re-entry. I mean, and maybe that's, I guess, I'm trying to keep track of 15 thoughts, and I'm just going to have to let some of them go. I guess some of that for me is those movies are about people that come home. And yeah, there's the angle that they're broken,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also the angle, like Rambo especially, is about the guy that comes home and home doesn't want him anymore.
Yeah.
And there's that sense of having been on a journey
Mm-hmm.
and coming back. I mean, it's the hobbits coming back to a place, hobbits don't have adventures.
Yeah.
And Bilbo leaves on a great adventure and comes home, and he never belongs there anymore because nobody wants to have adventures. And nobody wants to change. They're happy not having adventures. They're not happy not going anywhere. And, I mean, there's a lot of complicated things with war.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have, I mean, especially Rambo's Vietnam, you have the whole anti-war movement exploded with Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so that plays into it. There's, cultural politics and stuff. There's actual politics. But at some level, there's this sense that, yeah, he was changed by being there, and there wasn't a place for him when he came back. There wasn't a space to work through that change. There wasn't a space for the changed version. And maybe that's some of it, I guess. And maybe that's the counter to that. Maybe the counter to that is the rise of the anti-hero.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at Firefly.
Yeah.
Mel Reynolds is like classic anti-hero. And that's sort of his thing, is he leaves home, he goes to war, and we never get into home there, but when he comes back after the war, he doesn't belong anywhere anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he does is goes and becomes an anti-hero at some level.
Builds a new home.
And builds a new home that isn't the old place. Because he looks for a place... I guess I'm thinking this in terms of modern society, where everybody is slotted in somewhere, and you are everything at some level technique. Everything is neatly defined. Everything is very efficient, and there's no room for change. There's no room for uncertainty. There's no room for somebody who's radically different, who's had radically different experiences. We don't care. What we want is for you to come back and flip burgers. I mean,
it's funny because
Shawshank Redemption gets into this as well. What happens when you get out of prison?
You hang yourself.
Yeah, because there's no place you can belong. Because you can't just go then be a grocery clerk. You can't just go be a bag boy down at the grocery store, because you've been so much more than that. And you figure in a less industrialized society, I don't know. It's something I find very interesting. I want to, yeah.
I want to get back to that, but I think what you just described was the exact opposite. I mean, you totally destroyed my golden age view of the past as having fewer decisions, because the world you just described, where we're so much more compartmentalized, I see that is true as well, in that the roles we get defined into in our lives today, like, do tend to be narrower.
Yeah.
Like I would say the industrial, how do I put this? The weight of our society puts us into narrower and more specialized roles.
Yeah,
whereas in the past, what roles you're put into might have been much more likely to have been made for you, decided for you. The roles that you choose now are narrower.
Well, and there was a sense where if the role was made for you, you could also make at some level you had a lot of freedom to customize the role.
Yeah.
You know, you grew up in a family of carpenters or of farmers or of loggers, and yes, you're going to do that.
Yeah.
But you're going to bring incredibly unique personality and style to that. You're going to do it your own way. You're going to do your own things with it, and you're going to be you're going to be recognized as being good at particular things that, that are you.
Yeah.
And yes, you can sort of take the reductivist approach and say, well, they're all farmers, they're all loggers, they're all carpenters, but they're not. They're all different.
Well, yeah. I mean, I never really wanted to be a skidder operator. I wanted to run a cat, because my dad ran a cat.
Okay.
I'd never really wanted to run chainsaw, because I knew that I would kill myself. I definitely wanted to run button top, because that was just awesome, Okay.
What's button top?
Track loader rather than wheel loader, like an excavator, but
yeah.
But okay, I kind of want to go back to the anti-hero, because we were talking about. Okay,
Let me throw something on this.
You throw this out first.
As far as choice goes, I'm trying to find the stupid... No, that's not where it is. Because I actually wrote a section on this in my thesis and cut it because it wasn't particularly relevant to what I was talking about. But Butler has this interesting discussion. I'm going to paraphrase it because I can't actually... Let me check one other thing here. What I wrote about, based on Butler, is sort of the idea that in modern society we are faced with the proliferation of choices.
Yeah.
But those choices are all meaningless. Because freedom has been... How does it go? Freedom has been defined as choice. Yeah. That's literally what it is. And there's the connection with the discussion of the farmer. Well, you're only free if you can choose to be a logger instead of a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And fine, that's an interesting thing to discuss because it gets
I could agree with that.
It goes somewhere. But then what we've done in modern society is reduce choice to consumer choice. And so freedom is only ever consumer choice. And so you're only free insofar as you can go to the computer store and pick what color you'd like your computer to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at what's happening with tablets and with mobile phones. The apps are becoming increasingly... The apps and the OS control and app control and maker control are becoming increasingly tight. I mean, Windows is moving this way. Windows used to be the open operating system, sort of, and you could run anything on it. And they're making a shift towards a tablet market, a mobile market, where everything is tightly controlled.
which is so crazy because, I mean, 10 years ago I would never have predicted this because of
Well, I
the
know,
way
and
open source was going. I was sure, as soon as I heard that that Apple was going to a closed OS, I'm like, okay, they've just gone out and killed themselves because they're going against every trend.
Yeah.
But then they made money at it, and that set the trend.
Yeah, and I mean, you can get into
Yeah.
the details of that, but it's some levels you have a sense where things are becoming more and more controlled. But what the counterbalance to that, and it's a really crappy counterbalance, but the counterbalance to that is that now, while you can't choose much about the software, you can choose what color the hardware is. You know, see, you go to the Wii is a great example. Okay, the Wii, Nintendo's ridiculous. I love Nintendo's stuff, but they're ridiculous for the way that everything is so controlled with their systems. You can't hack it. You can't do this. You can't do that. You have to have pay for a license to put software on, and they're tighter than any of the other consoles, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
But you can buy it, and you can buy a Wii now in 3 different colors.
You know,
And they do limited edition Wiis that come out with certain game releases and stuff. And so now you can have a black Wii, and you could have blue controllers and a pink controller, and you have choice.
Oh,
and
wow,
you have really meaningful choice, and your life is meaningful and free because you can choose what color your Wii is.
This sounds like arguing against racism in a country where we all have to think alike, but we will never discriminate against you based on how you look. So complete freedom of I would say you are free to be whatever color you are and dress however you are, but we still have to have the same values and think alike.
Yeah. Well, and this might be Brown, actually, now that you're saying that. That might be where I got from it, because Brown gets into all that. Yeah.
Brown who?
Wendy Brown. Which
Okay.
I also used her for my thesis. And it all ties into that, the idea of, choice has become this very ephemeral thing. That, it doesn't matter, because I guess that's the logical next step from technique and from power and knowledge, is that once we have internalized the values of our society, internalized those myths to such an incredible degree, we can then allow freedom. We no longer have to wear all the same uniforms because we're all the same on the inside. And so now it doesn't matter that, we have 15 different styles of whatever.
Huh. This kind of reminds me of a discussion I listened to today with Tariq Ali on, no, it was last night actually, I think. Oh, maybe it was today. Anyways, Tariq Ali was discussing the death of Hugo Chavez. And he's a very, very much like leftist.
He's a communist leader.
He's a communist leader. Tariq Ali is?
No.
Yeah.
Oh,
Tariq Ali is a leftist
Okay.
kind of intellectual based out of London. And
Okay.
he was friends with
Chavez.
yeah.
Ah.
And so he was talking about how the elections in Venezuela were so much more contentious than Canada, and the interviewer was saying, well, wasn't he having too much control over the opposition? And he said, well, you look at the divide, the gap between the opposition and him. And I don't know if he was trying to justify what Chavez has done or whatever he was doing, but he said that the differences between the opposition and Chavez were so incredibly wide, whereas in most of the in Western Europe or North America, the difference between a center-left and center-right party might be one issue, whereas in South America, the choices between the two options usually in an election are so far apart as to make it a real choice. Whereas in much of the rest of the world, we're like, can't they just get along? Well, that's because we actually are so close. We are so close to being homogenized as cultures that our political choices no longer really have that much meaning.
Well, that makes politics almost another act of nihilism.
An act of nihilism?
Nihilism. It becomes
okay.
nihilistic, and that's sort of that's how it feeds back. That's a simple way. Is instead of if nothing we do matters, all matters is what we do. It's if nothing we do matters, then what we do is do it harder. which is really nihilism, if that makes sense.
Not quite yet.
That idea that our choices don't matter because and I'm trying to this is intuitively, but I'm gonna have to try and articulate it now. Looking at American politics. Okay. If you make the argument that America is becoming more homogenized,
but the choice doesn't matter.
Well, just follow. I'm not sure if that's a sound argument or not, but we'll follow that line.
If it does.
If you make the argument that it's becoming more homogenized, then the Republicans and Democrats are becoming less and less different. The counterpart to that is the polarization is becoming increasingly extreme.
Yeah.
And it's almost a reaction. It's that sense that I'm losing my. It's getting late and I'm starting to lose track of thoughts. Okay, the will to power. Whew, I've explained this to you before, and I'm trying to remember how I've explained it. The idea, Nietzsche's idea of nihilism is tied up in the will to power. When we can will, basically the idea we hit a place where eventually we can will nothing. The greatest thing we can will anymore is our own destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's at some level how that feeds. As the differences become smaller and smaller, we have to make them seem bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Because our lives are becoming then, our decision becomes less and less meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to act as if it is more and more meaningful.
In order to keep meaning in our life.
Yeah. And it literally becomes, we can't will anything else, and so we will ourselves, in the end, will ourselves to destruction. We polarize so far that we go to war over it, and that's it.
And we go to war over nothing because there's nothing...
We're not fighting about anything more because we are the same. We just can't realize it because we built a culture around making this meaningful difference, making this meaningful choice. When we realize that choice is meaningless, there's nothing left. And we end. We willingly end ourselves. And that's the thing. I mean, that's the quick way to say it, is if nothing we do matters, then we have to do it harder. Because you go harder and harder, and eventually it kills you. And it's a total disjunct, and it's totally insane, but that's, Are you following?
I am. No, that part I followed, yeah. I'm thinking about how,
it's interesting.
At some point in the past, our political differences were much, much larger, yet maybe we didn't consider them to be so much.
Well, and that flips then back into the current state of Christianity. Not Christian culture, but Christianity, where we don't, the fights, the denominational differences aren't significant anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's weird... I don't know if that actually follows, but... Yeah.
Well, and we are getting rid of a lot of the denominational boundaries in the way in which we see ourselves. People no longer see themselves by the denomination; they see themselves in much, much broader terms, which then themselves draw battle lines and.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, and those lines are becoming darker even as they're becoming drawn on really insubstantial issues.
So
where it used to. I don't know that that actually holds though.
Or we form the World Council of Churches so we can have more allies in a much greater fight rather than beating up on each other one-on-one. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how that holds.
We should probably stop.
Okay. I really wanted to get back to the idea of... the question... Okay, we talked about the heroic journey of going out and...
Coming back,
And coming back.
Re-entry.
And re-entry and realizing that the place where you were is where you always wanted to be, but now having the understanding to... really understand the place where you've now worked your way back to.
Yeah.
And in the same idea of choosing simplicity so that you can because you've realized that that's what you want, not because of a lack of a refusal to make that decision or to make decisions.
Yeah. Well, maybe at some level choosing simplicity not as an act of rebellion, but as an act of choice, because an act of rebellion is always, you're always already inscribed within your culture.
Oh, okay, so a rebellion is making all of your decisions within the context of your myth in the very same way as choosing to live in that myth is.
Yeah.
So, in other words,
it's
trying
the binary,
to...
Well, I can't be white, so I'll be black, which really isn't getting outside of the binary.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do then, in some respects, is to live as rebels, but not out of rebellion.
It's not even. It's not living as rebels.
Well,
it's
I
living
think that,
free.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, say a rebel's idea is I'm going to live free of this, free of that, and free of that.
Yeah.
But we're simply going to live free, but we're not going to live free of.
Yeah, because it might be Brown that talks about that. Somebody actually talks about that freedom from. Oh no, that was in I can't remember his name, but he does this wonderful short little book that I also use in my thesis about freedom. And that was where he talks about how freedom is commonly defined as freedom from. Yeah, freedom from or freedom over. You're either in control of everything or you're beyond control of anything. And both of them are broken conceptions of freedom.
Yeah. So
freedom is about the negotiation. It's not about
so
escape or mastery.
the question I wanted to ask was, and I guess this will be a question for next time, would be to the story of the anti-hero and the anti-hero's return. How would we look at this process we've talked about just now, basically renegotiating our freedom, and how would the story of the anti-hero fit into that, and what would that tell us about? I mean, what sort of a journey would that be if you looked at it in the context of a journey about how we view the world, like a spiritual journey? What would be the end goal of that sort of a story? And I don't really know what the answer is at it. I just feel like there has to be some meaning to that story that should apply at this level as well.
So what do we do with the anti-hero?
Yeah.
What do we learn from re-entry? At some level, that's what do we learn. It also entails what do we learn from third culture kids, which I can speak to.
Just burn them. No. Huh.
I did have something in here. I don't remember if we talked about this on the recording or not. Yeah, going back to scientists and Pharisees.
Okay.
He actually hits that. Where is it? Telling about how, the Bible became metaphysics.
Yeah.
And stuff. He says it's
is
a problem of the Enlightenment, basically.
Jacques Ellul.
Ellul. He does a whole bunch of Thea, but he says the theologians were the first to confuse truth and reality by thinking that the truth as revealed was reality. The scientists followed suit, but in the opposite direction, by thinking that the reality they studied was the truth. The Bible deals with something entirely different, namely meaning. Which is, yeah. it's a very concise sort of
summation of everything.
Summation of that, yeah.
All
Anyways,
right.
That's enough for tonight.
I think so.
That was fun.